If there's fire in your soul, you gotta rock and roll. So come on, let's get moving.
This is Xinyan. So of course, with this being a new character, I wasn't really surprised that you guys chose to vote for her in the last poll. Although I do have to say that it was kind of interesting to see Kaya pull such a huge lead in the beginning, and then it just completely got pulled out from underneath him. But 33,000 votes, which is pretty awesome. We are nearing the goal of 15,000 subs before the end of the year. So really quickly, if you guys want to help with that, you can sub at any point in time. If you don't want to stay subbed, you can of course unsub. On to the topic at hand today. We are talking about Xinyan, and she is a brand new pyro character that got released on the latest banner along with Zhongli. And she is kind of an interesting character. She's got some interesting things about her, and I've actually been having quite a bit of fun using her lately. So let's go ahead and start by talking about some talents. So our normal attack here is called Dance on Fire. She's going to perform 4 consecutive strikes. Her charge attack is going to be the typical claymore thing where she just spins around and then she ends with a powerful slash. And plunging attack is the standard, just from the air, just slam the sword into the ground. Here you can see what it looks like at level 5. Of course, if you just pull her, it is going to look a little different for you, but you can kind of see how it breaks down, starting with a decent hit, going down a little bit, a strong hit, and then a really strong hit on the 4th hit. Next, we have Sweeping Fervor. So Xinyan brandishes her instrument, dealing pyro damage to nearby enemies, forming a shield made out of her audience passion. The shield's damage absorption scales based on her defense and as the number of enemies are hit. So basically, if you're hitting 0 to 1 enemies, she grants 1 level, which is ad lib. Hitting 2 enemies grants level 2, which is lead in, and hitting 3 or more grants rave, which will also deal intermittent pyro damage to nearby enemies. Shield does have the following special properties. When unleashed, it infuses Xinyan with pyro, which is kind of important because it actually can cleanse certain elements off of you if you are in need of protection. It also has 250% damage absorption effectiveness against pyro damage, which is nice. Here you can see how all that breaks down. The swing damage as soon as you activate the skill will do 170%. And then as you can see, all of your damage absorptions at each level here. And remember, it does base off of your defense. So that is very important whenever you're building her. Whenever we talk about artifacts, that will kind of be a topic of discussion. We do have the damage over time. All that good stuff is there as well. Next, we do have Rift Revolution, which strumming rapidly Xinyan launches nearby enemies and deals physical damage to them, hyping up the crowd. The sheer intensity of the atmosphere will cause explosions that deal pyro damage to nearby enemies. Pretty standard. It doesn't really have like any kind of crazy effects or anything. 341% damage. Pyro damage over time is 40%. Duration, all that good stuff is there. Next, we have The Show Goes On, even without an audience. So decreases the number of enemies Sweeping Fervor must hit to trigger each level of shielding. So level 2 is actually achieved whenever you hit just 1 enemy, and level 3 is achieved whenever you hit just 2 enemies or more. That pretty much just lowers the requirements to hit these shielding numbers here, which is bigger and better shields. Nothing to complain about. Next is Now That's Rock and Roll. Characters shielded by Sweeping Fervor deal 15% increased physical damage. So this is actually really cool because basically what you can do is you can pair Xinyan with any kind of physical damager that you have set up on your team, whether it's Razor, My Fischl is my physical damager, Jean, however you set that stuff up. You can basically pop your E, create a shield, switch over to your damage dealer who is going to be dealing major physical damage, and just go to town. Last but not least, we do have a rad recipe. When a perfect cooking is achieved on a defense boosting dish, Xinyan has a 12% chance to obtain double the product. Now let's take a look at some constellations here. So I did very minimal pulling. I only have her at C0, but there are some very interesting constellations to look at here. So starting at level 1, we do have Fatal Acceleration. Upon scoring a critical hit, increase the attack speed of Xinyan's normal and charged attacks by 12% for 5 seconds. It can only occur once every 5 seconds. Now, this doesn't sound super impressive at first, but there are a couple of things that make this really, really interesting. Next, we have Impromptu Opening. Rift's Revolution's physical damage has its crit rate increased by 100% and will form a shield at shield level 3 Rave when cast. So if you have her at Constellation level 2, it works so well with Constellation level 1. This boosts your burst crit rate up to 100%, which in turn will activate your Constellation level 1, increasing your attack speed of your normal and charged attacks by 12%. So very, very cool interaction there. Next, we have Double Stop, which just increases Sweeping Fervor by 3. We have Wildfire Rhythm, which Sweeping Fervor's swing damage decreases opponent's physical resistance by 15% for 12 seconds, so that's actually kind of cool. Screaming for an Encore at level 5 increases the level of Rift Revolution by 3. And last at C6, we do have Rockin' in a Flamin' World decreases the stamina consumption of Xinyan's charged attacks by 30%, and additionally, Xinyan's charged attacks gain an attack bonus equal to 50% of her defense. So this is very similar to how Noelle's level 6 works. The way I look at it is, even with Noelle, like, I would build Noelle as a strictly defensive character to begin with, but if I ever got her to the point of, you know, having her at C6, I would already have been working on her defense so much that her C6 just kind of pays off by adding in the extra attack at that point. So I still think that it's a very, very interesting kit. It's, you know, it may take forever to get her up to C6, but I think Xinyan with the extra 50% of her defense added onto her attack it's pretty good. So when it comes to building Xinyan, she actually can be viable in both a DPS format and a support format. So let's go ahead and talk about support first, just because I feel like most people are going to be looking at making her a support. But if you have C6, you know, DPS is obviously very possible, just like Noelle has proven to be viable as, you know, a decent DPS. So let's talk about support first, and then we'll move into the DPS stuff. So weapons, when it comes to building Xinyan in a support type of situation, are pretty self-explanatory. You're basically going to focus on energy recharge. Anything that gives you energy recharge, like the sacrificial greatsword, is going to be quite amazing. It's not super free to play friendly because it does come from the gacha, but it's actually really, really good in terms of just keeping her able to keep her shield pumped up, because not only is it going to give you the energy recharge to help her offer her burst up more often, but after damaging an opponent with an elemental skill, the skill has a 40% chance to reduce its own cooldown, and that's at refinement level 1. So as it goes up, it's just going to get even better and even better. If you don't have the sacrificial greatsword, the white blind is actually a great option as well. It doesn't increase energy recharge, but it does increase defense, which ties into her kit really well. Because that defense will add in extra shielding, it makes a lot of sense to run this one as well. Its secondary ability is on hit, normal or charged attacks increase attack and defense by 6% for 6 seconds, max 4 stacks, can only occur once every half second. So very, very cool weapon. It's very highly recommended on Noelle, and it makes a lot of sense to run here as well. Next, we do have the Skyward Pride, which actually is also going to increase energy recharge. It's not free to play friendly at all whatsoever, but if you have it, it does work here. Increases all damage by 8%, and after using an elemental burst, normal or charged attack on hit, creates a vacuum blade that does 80% of attack as damage to enemies along its path, lasts for 20 seconds or 8 blades. So definitely viable here. I feel like that is only really used because energy recharge is important, and then the rest of it is kind of more of like DPS focus. But anyways, and then last option that you could really go with here is the Favonius Greatsword. And the reason that you would want to go with the Favonius Greatsword is because mainly it has the energy recharge on it, which is great, but crit hits have a 60% chance to generate a small amount of elemental particles, which will regenerate 6 energy for the character and can only occur once every 12 seconds. So if you pair that with the C2 and C1 functionality already kind of synergizing together, the Favonius Greatsword helps out by just generating a ton of energy, plus it already has energy recharge on it, which is just amazing. Like it really will help you get to your burst super fast if you have C2, or if you just build her with a ton of crit rate. Now, when it comes to artifacts, there are a couple of different combinations that we could use here. The top choice would probably be to go with Noblesse Oblige at a full set, especially if you have Constellation level 2. It makes a ton of sense to go with this, simply because it's going to give your elemental burst a ton more damage, and it's going to activate a 20% increase to attack to all of the party members. Typically, if you're running Xinyan as a support, you're using your elemental skill to give people shields, get that physical buff off to the next damage dealer, and then by using your burst, you're doing a ton of damage. You're going to get an extra 20% here, plus you're going to give that damage dealer another 20% attack on top of that. So a full set of Noblesse Oblige makes a ton of sense here. You could also go with a 2-piece of the Bloodstained Chivalry here, which will increase your physical damage, and then you could go with the Noblesse Oblige to get a 20% boost of your elemental burst as well. I think that one would work pretty decently. It's kind of almost like a hybrid situation. And if you're just using her to fire off burst as often as possible, go with a 2-piece of the Noblest Oblige, and then you could actually go with a 2-piece of the Exile set to help just generate a ton of energy so that you can just get that burst off as often as possible. Now, no matter which sets you end up going with, just remember physical damage is actually super important on Xinyan, especially if you have her C2 or above. If you don't worry about physical damage nearly as much, but defense is going to be probably the top priority for most people. But if you are in that situation where you do have C2 or above, definitely don't forget about your physical damage, because her crit rate and doing physical damage on her burst is just going to be insanely powerful, and she becomes almost like a more of even like a hybrid support that can do, you know, pretty decent DPS. Don't forget to remember your crit rate, your crit damage, and definitely don't forget your attack and energy recharge, of course, as with most supports, is going to be huge here. Now, when it comes to leveling up your talents, probably the top recommendation that we would want to go with here is Sweeping Fervor, because you're going to be using this as often as possible to get those shields up and keep your team buffed and shielded as much as possible for those physical damagers. That's going to be huge. And then work on your Rift Revolution so that you can keep getting off some big damage, and especially that physical damage that goes off is going to work in really well with your kit. And then as a, you know, support, you don't really use your normal attack very often, but you can kind of focus on that last if you even want to focus on it at all. On to DPS. So DPS weapons for Xinyan are, honestly, they're kind of overwhelming at the moment. There are a ton of different options that you can go with, just simply because claymores are so freaking powerful to begin with, that a lot of options here make a ton of sense. And honestly, you're just kind of eliminating things that don't make any sense. So I guess what I'll do is start from the top as far as like recommended, and we'll work our way down. But just know that every single one of these options are completely viable. So the first thing that we're going to talk about are the 5 stars. So we have the Unforged, the Wolf's Gravestone, and Skyward Pride. Now, all 3 of these are super unfriendly for free-to-play characters, but all 3 of them are super powerful here. Attack percent on the Unforged and Wolf's Gravestone make a ton of sense for her as a DPS, and then Skyward Pride, which we talked about for a support, you know, gives energy recharge, which depending on what your Constellations level are, may make more sense for you so that you can get into that burst more often. But either way, all 3 of those are going to do perfectly fine. Now let's talk about some 4 stars that aren't super free-to-play friendly, but more likely that you'll have these in the 5 stars for sure. So first up, we've got the Serpent Spine, then we've got the Royal Greatsword, Blackcliff Slasher, Sacrificial Sword, and then Favonius Greatsword. So all of these are going to be doing just fine. The Serpent Spine, Battle Pass weapon, increasing crit rate. This one is kind of an iffy one for me, because you're already, especially if you have C2 and above, you're already going to be like 100% crit rate on your Elemental Burst. Increasing your crit rate elsewhere is going to help, but it almost feels wasted in some way, even though it's not. Like, I'm sure that mathematically it's going to work out to be, you know, better than other options by far, but it just feels kind of wasted to have that as the substat on the weapon, because you're already getting, you know, a crit rate for your burst, and you're always going to burst at a crit if you have C2 or above. But either way, it's definitely still amazing. The Royal Greatsword is going to increase your attack percent, which is always great as a DPS. Blackcliff Slasher increases crit damage, which to me, if you are focusing on a, like, I can imagine, like, my perfect DPS build would be C2 or above Xinyan, and then having, like, the Blackcliff Slasher and increasing crit damage as high as absolutely possible, and then just having energy recharge as substats, maybe even like a Sands artifact with, you know, energy recharge on it or something like that, just to help increase, like, getting into that burst as often as possible, and then always critting with that Elemental Burst, and then increasing that crit damage as absolutely much as possible. I feel like that would just be so fun. It would be so kamikaze, which is just right up my playstyle, but, you know, I just think that would be really fun. We already talked about the Sacrificial Greatsword and the Favonius Greatsword as support options, but they do also work here as well, simply because if you're building your Xinyan as a physical damager to begin with, Sacrificial Greatsword makes some sense here, because you can literally keep your shield up, and your shield's going to increase your physical damage. That it just makes a lot of sense to keep that going. And then Favonius Greatsword also makes sense here, because as with crits, you're going to have, you know, a ton of extra energy coming in, and at C2 or above, you're going to have a ton of crit get damage go out anyways. Now, on to the most free-to-play friendly options. Prototype Amethyst is going to be actually one of the best weapons that you can use on her. Increasing attack percents, and on hit, normal or charged attacks have a 50% chance to deal an additional 240% attack damage to enemies with a small AoE. That's freaking huge. I love that weapon. I am waiting on a drop so that I can make one. The old trusty debate club is still going to be really good here, increasing attack percent. That's what I've currently been using, and she still puts up decent numbers for what she is. The white blind is also great. I forged it for my Noelle, and I think that it's still a very viable weapon. Increasing your defense percent definitely does help keep you shielded longer and stuff like that. Plus, being that it's a 4-star weapon, it's going to have higher base stats than the debate club, which is going to be outputting more damage in the long run anyways. And last but not least, we do have the Skyrider Greatsword, which does increase your physical damage, which is kind of ties into this kit where you run your elemental burst and stuff like that. It just makes a lot of sense. There's tons of different options for her, and I think that's one of the coolest things about her right now is there's so many options that you could run with her that literally there's more things that you're gonna do right with Xinyan as a DPS than what you're gonna do wrong right now, which is super, super cool. Now, when it comes to your artifacts, I am going to admit that I have not farmed out any retracing Belied yet, just simply because I haven't had a reason to, but I think I want to actually start working on Xinyan and Noelle, as far as taking their shields a little bit more serious. So I think I am going to start farming these a little bit more often, just so that I can have some. But those are like top choice when it comes to artifacts. The set is just amazing. At a 2-piece, it's going to increase the shield strength by 35%, but at a 4-piece, which is really what we're going for here, while protected by a shield, gain an additional 40% normal and charged attack damage. So one thing that's important here is that only applies to the wearer of this set, so it's not like you can run Retracing Belied on Xinyan as a support and then switch off of her. The character that you switch into, even though they will still have the shield, they're not going to get the increase of the artifact bonus that comes on with that. So while that's not like super enticing as a DPS though, that makes a ton of sense to run that because you as the DPS running Xinyan will get that bonus, just outputting a ton more damage. So definitely worth considering running a full set of Retracing Belied. But then you can kind of, if you don't want to run that, you can think about maybe not only Bloodstained Chivalry, but the Gladiators Finale as well. And you can kind of mix and match these however you want to. If you want to do, a full set of Gladiators, that's fine. If you want to do a full set of Bloodstained Chivalry, that's fine. Or if you want to do a 2-piece of each, they both work really well like that as well. So Gladiators Finale, plus 18 attack, super huge. If the wielder is a Claymore user, makes sense for us. Increase their normal attack by 35%, which is amazing. Bloodstained Chivalry, of course, increases physical damage, and after defeating an opponent, increases charge attack damage by 50%. If you're the type of person that uses charge attacks, Bloodstained Chivalry sounds a little bit more up your alley. If you're the type of person that uses normal attacks, that's me. Gladiators Finale makes more sense. Or if you just want to mix and match them to get both bonuses for the plus 18 and the plus 25 respectively, then you can do it that way. No matter which set you end up going with, just make sure that you definitely prioritize your physical damage, which is going to be huge on Xinyan here, and then definitely don't forget your crit rate, your crit damage as well. If you have C2 or above, obviously, it's a little bit skewed towards crit damage in my opinion, but you can kind of work it how you want to. Attack, of course, because everything works off of attack. Energy recharge is used because you're, especially at C2, going to be firing off your burst as often as possible. And then defense, because your shields do scale off of defense. So definitely don't forget that defense can be super important when building her. Now, when it comes to your talent prioritization, as a DPS, you always really want to focus on your normal attack first. You're going to be doing this super often, so don't forget to pretty much boost this first, and then you can work on Rift Revolution because it makes a lot of sense to be firing this off as often as possible, especially since it's going to have the physical damage and then a little bit of pyro damage added in, and then you can start working on your elemental skill after you work on both of those. So with that being said, let's actually go check out something for Xinyan here. Now, as you can see, my Xinyan is at level 60. I boosted her up to level 60 like the day that I got her, but I didn't focus too much on getting her past level 60 simply because I I think I'm eventually going to move her into being a shield support. I built her as a DPS just because the options as far as weapons go were a lot more forgiving for what I had, and I think it just made more sense at the time to do that. But eventually I will move her into being more of a support rather than a DPS. But just for the little demonstration that we have going here, I will focus on using her as a DPS. I do have her artifacts set up with my main DPS's physical damage set, so it's a 2-piece gladiator, 2-piece bloodstained chivalry. So let's hop into this and let's fight this little Electro mage here. So, as you can see, doing some decent damage. And, the buff from our shield gives us some extra damage on top of that, which is pretty nice. See that plunging attack there. Do our little 4-hit combo. Let's see. Let's pop that again. And boom, 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 boom. So pretty gnarly. Charged attack. Yep. Thanks for running away from me there. As you can see, that's kind of how it works, but very, very cool. Her attacks are really interesting. I actually like her a lot as a DPS. She's really fun to play. And let's pop off this burst here. So boom, 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 boom. It's a very, very cool looking burst, actually. And bam. And as you can see, that's kind of like the gist of her kit. I think she's really, really fun to play. I've never really been into shield users. I didn't really build Noelle when I first got her, and I didn't really use her a lot even after, I started to try to focus on her. I just didn't really have the artifacts or the equipment to really use. But, building Xinyan is super different for me, and throwing on a shield is not really my type of playstyle, but I definitely see the benefits in doing it, and I think that she's intriguing enough to at least want me to, like, I ran around for a couple of days with her in my party, just kind of using her to explore and fight random mobs and stuff like that, and she actually, like, I enjoyed it, which is different for me. Typically, I think that she is just fine. I saw a lot of people that were saying, like, she's, like, amazing, that she's top notch. Like, maybe at, like, the higher constellation levels, she's, a lot more rewarding. But, I mean, personally, like, if you have her at C0, if you don't have her at C2, then I don't think that you're gonna see, like, amazing numbers out of her. Maybe once you get to C2, it'll be a little bit more impressive, but even then, I mean, she's fine. She's not amazing. She's not terrible. She's, in my opinion, a perfectly solid 4-star character. There's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing amazing about her, but she's all around okay. The only thing that I hate is that stupid voice they gave her. The like highly southern, like super redneck kind of voice just does not fit her whatsoever. She's cute, but I hate her voice. So that's gonna be it for Xinyan, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Here we go.
Looks pretty rock and roll to me.
I don't like it. Anyways, that's going to be it for today, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Of course, when this goes up, I will post another poll. We'll, vote on the next character. It will include a 5-star since we talked about Venti as our last 5-star. I guess I'll include Child. You know what? I'm going to troll everybody. Most people don't stick around to the end of the video anyways, so I'm going to troll everybody and put the Traveler on there. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. As always, remember, I am trying to get to 15,000 before the end of the year. It is very, very quickly approaching to 15,000, so I'm kind of confident that we'll hit it. I just appreciate you guys. So until the next video, see you then.